Are you on the path of learning software testing or you are already in testing domain? This video is going to be super useful for you, in which we are going to talk about different types of testing. Hi, my name is Amit Tripathi and I am an automation testing expert, career coach, and your friend in this journey of learning new things related to automation testing. In this video, we are going to learn about what are different types of testing, what are different ways to perform testing, and last but not the least, what are different phases of testing. This video may get a little lengthy because I am going to explain these concepts very clearly so that it becomes very useful for you to grab these information rather than getting half knowledge. You know, we all have heard that saying, "Aadha gyan hanikarak hota hai." So let's get started without any delay. But before we begin, please subscribe to this channel if you wanted to get useful information related to automation testing and IT industry. Without any further delay, let's begin.
So quickly, we are going to go through number 1, types of testing. Number 2 is ways to perform testing. Number 3, phases of testing. Okay, so let's go ahead with types of testing. Types of testing, basically, if we categorize as per the ways it can be done, so we can categorize it in 2 parts. First is manual testing and another is automation testing. Okay, so let's go ahead with manual testing because we will be discussing manual testing and automation testing in the ways to perform the testing. So manual testing basically can be categorized in further 3 categories, which is white box testing, black box testing, and gray box testing. And white box testing, when it comes to the picture, white box basically means whatever code has been written by the developers and whatever application has been developed, the code of it is available to test. Okay, so in white box testing, basically the person who is already aware of the coding of that particular software does the testing. So in this type of testing, basically we provide some input or developers provide some input and they test the application code based on the expected output of any particular input. Okay, and in black box testing, test cases input. So in black box testing, what we do, we don't have the access of the code. So in that case, what happens, we write test cases, we based on the different validations point, different ways to check any particular software, we write test cases, and based on that we write the output and we just validate based on certain input if our output is coming correct or not. In this case, in this black box testing, we don't have any access to the code. So that is the difference between white box and black box testing. Number 3 is gray box testing. So as name says, gray means it's a combination of black and white. So in this also, in gray box, what we do, we have certain part of the application, certain coding part of the application already shown or accessible to the tester. So in that case, what happens, a person who is already aware of the coding part of the application, based on that and taking consideration of coding as well as the outside of the applications, like outside the coding part. So combining those both knowledge, they perform the testing and they write the test cases, and eventually they based on the test case and based on the expected output, they write the test cases, and whatever the outcome, they based on that they perform testing. So that's gray box testing. Now black box testing has been divided into functional testing and non-functional testing. So what is functional testing now? Functional testing basically means checking all the components against a requirement specification is called as functional testing. That means whenever we try to write a software or write the code for a software, we already get the requirements from the client, right? So I say I have to create a booking website, and in that booking website we need certain features. So what will happen? So before writing the code, actually we create test plan, test cases, and then eventually we try to do the testing, and we write the test cases based on all the components and all the different components and features. So for example, in our booking website, there is a feature for booking, payment feature is another part, then search feature is another part. So like that, there are multiple features, and for those particular feature we write test cases and then eventually validate on the expected outcome, whether that input, whatever things we are doing as a functionality, that is giving us expected output or not. So in functional testing, again, all the components are tested, and that's why it is also called component testing. And in functional testing, all the components are tested by giving the value, defining the output, and validating the actual output with the expected value. Okay, so that's a functional testing. Now coming next to non-functional testing. So non-functional testing is what? In which we are not very much bothered about whether my software is working from end to end or not, certain feature is working or not. We are not bothered about that, but rather our primary purpose of non-functional testing is to test the reading speed of the software system. So for example, if I give you one example, so if I am loading the website, then whether my website is fast enough to load within a fraction of seconds or not. When number of users are trying to access my website, then that website is accessible to lakhs and lakhs of people at once or not. So those kind of parameters, based on that parameters we perform non-functional testing. So non-functional testing, again, as you know, it is very important as it plays a crucial role in customer satisfaction. For example, if I have created a booking website and it takes too long, maybe 5 seconds to load only, you will not feel good, and eventually you will leave the website, and leaving website means it is a loss to the business and loss to the that particular website. So that's why non-functional testing is as important as functional testing. Now further going, functional testing has been divided into 3 different categories. First is unit testing, second is integration testing, and third is system testing. Okay, so what happens in unit testing? Unit testing basically done by developers mostly, and in unit testing, whatever small components of codes written by developers, those being tested by developers themselves basically. So what happens, let's suppose they have created a method, and for that particular method they wanted to give some input, and based on that input they wanted to test whether it is giving us expected output or not. So based on that they try test that code. So that is called unit testing, because they are testing small units of software. Now next is integration testing. So what is integration testing? Basically, integration testing is when you integrate multiple small units together, or small features together, then how it is behaving, how software is behaving, that's called integration testing. So for example, if I have search functionality, and while booking a particular maybe movie or something else, then whether I am able to search properly or not, if I am able to search, whether I am able to make the choices or not. So combining both, whether I am able to do something or not, that's called integration testing. Third comes system testing. So system testing basically means it involves, it does not only involve software part of it, but hardware part of it also. So if if I give you one example, where there is a site in the kirana store, okay, for departmental store there is a website which helps shopkeeper to make a purchase, make a invoice or something, and once payment is done, then it prints the invoices, the bill. So that part is whether my software is working well with the invoicing machine or not, whether it is printing the bills properly or not. So considering hardware and software both, when we perform the testing, it's called system testing. Now coming next, non-functional testing can be divided into multiple testing types. So first is performance testing. So as you understand that non-functional testing is about testing different parameters than functional things. Okay, so in that case there are 3 different types: performance testing, usability testing, and compatibility testing. So what is performance testing? Again, performance testing has been divided into 4 different categories. First is load testing. How much load it can take. So for example, if I talk about load testing, then whether my website is robust enough to handle so much of load of users. So if I say that okay, today thousands of customers or thousands of users are logging into my website in a second. Now tomorrow, if suppose this 1,000 number of users may increase to 2,000. So if my user base has increased from 1,000 to 2,000, then how my website is behaving? Okay, so that is called load testing. So what is stress testing? So as name says, we give some stress to the website. Okay, so in what form? Basically in the form of, for example, if my website has capacity of loading, let's suppose thousands users in a second, then we take the website or take the load to that extent where my website is about to break. Okay, and in that circumstances, maybe how my website is behaving, at what stage it is breaking, or if we have certain resources which are out of storage, maybe memory is full, my CPU utilization is almost 100%, and all those kind of resources which are running at the full capacity, then how my website is behaving. So that is called stress testing. Now scalability testing. So in scalability testing, as name says, whether my website is scalable enough or not. So scalable means if my website is able to handle 1,000 users in a second, then what if suddenly 10,000 of users come into picture, or they try to log in immediately? Then how my website is behaving, whether it is able to scale itself, whether database capacity is increasing, CPU utilization if 100%, then whether it is able to increase the CPU utilization or CPU cores, it is able to allocate more memory or not, so it is able to scale its system or not. So that is scalability testing. Now stability testing. So stability, as its name says, whether my website is stable enough or not. So how do we test that? I am using whether it is giving 404 error, whether my website is not reliable enough to load, sometime it crashes. So those kind of things should not happen in stability testing. Now coming to usability testing. So in usability testing, basically we test that whether my website feel is good enough or not, whether user is liking it or not. So all those things are considered in usability testing. In usability testing, basically we more focus on UI and UX, whether my functionalities are good, it looks and feels good or not, all the UI part is good. So all those things we test in usability testing from user's point of view. Now compatibility testing. Compatibility testing simply means that whether my system is compatible with different systems which are there or not. So in compatibility testing, basically we test that different operating system, whether my software is compatible with different operating systems, different browser, different type of different applications if it is running, so whether it can run with the other applications or not. So all those things are tested in compatibility testing. Okay, so that was all in non-functional testing. So in a nutshell, non-functional testing basically is of 3 types: performance testing, usability testing, and compatibility testing. And further, performance testing is of 4 different types: load testing, stress testing, scalability testing, and stability testing. Okay, now there are other types of testing also. So what is smoke testing? Smoke testing simply means that you are testing only the most important features of that particular application. So for example, if I am using a booking website, okay, so whether payment is being done or not, booking is being able to create or not, I mean user is able to book something or not, whether payment is being made or not. So those kind of very important feature of a particular website is tested in smoke testing. We don't test so much of things. We don't test small things also, just basic functionalities, so for which that particular application exists. Okay, so those things we test in smoke testing. Now sanity testing. So sanity testing basically means whenever some bug fixes happens, or there is some defect in the application and developers provide some fix to that particular bug. So what we do as tester, get that new build of application to test, then what happens, this quickly go through the basic functionalities or basic check of the application, and then certify whether the basic things for which that bug had been raised is working fine or not. If that is working, then we will say that okay, sanity testing passed. Now when they start testing thoroughly, that's where regression testing comes into picture. Okay, regression testing simply means whatever bug fixes, whatever defects has been fixed by developers, whether that is causing any other issues or not. Okay, so basically testers test whether bug fixes or any changes in the code is not breaking other parts of the code. Okay, so for example, there was a bug in booking. So if booking has been fixed, it should not break the payments part. Okay, so that's like regression testing. So now what is user acceptance testing? So in user acceptance testing, basically customers or client test from their end from point of view of user. Okay, so what basically any real time scenarios or any business scenarios which are there, whether that are working fine or not, so that part is tested in user acceptance testing. In exploratory testing, basically there is a team of testers who go from requirement analysis phase again, and they try to find out the gaps in the requirement, and whatever ways they can think of scenarios which could be missing in requirement analysis phase, they start doing that, and then they perform the testing the application again. So that kind of testing is called as exploratory testing, where we analyze the requirements again and then try to find the gaps and then do the testing. So ad hoc testing. What is ad hoc testing basically? So ad hoc testing has gorilla and monkey testing also. So sometimes ad hoc testing is also called as gorilla testing or monkey testing. So what we do in this kind of testing, our basic aim is to break the application. So somehow we need such scenarios where we perform the test, and then we input something into the system, and then somehow my system gives error or something else. Okay, so that my system breaks or application breaks. Okay, so that is the basic intention of ad hoc testing, and this is also called as negative testing, because our main intention is that when we do this, then it should not happen. So that kind of perspective goes on in ad hoc testing. Now security testing, again as name says, we test the application based on the security parameters. So like any hacker should not hack our websites, any cookies are not unsecure or something. So those kind of any passwords are not compromised in the application. So those kind of testing we do in security testing. Okay, now last part is globalization testing. So globalization testing, as name says, that my application, whether it has features to globalize from different countries, from different places, people are able to access my website or not, whether there are language support or not, there are multiple language support or not. So those kind of things are tested in globalization testing. If that particular website is being used in Japan, then whether my website is translated in Japanese or not properly. So those kind of things are tested in globalization testing. Now going to the part 2 of this discussion, which is ways to perform testing. So there are two different ways. Okay, so first is manual testing. So whatever had been we were discussing, So if we are doing those things manually, so like if I have to perform the load testing, then I have some tools on which I increase the load or increase the number of users, then I am doing testing. Or there could be another scenario that if I have to make the booking on the website, then I go and I created the booking, I searched for the something and then booked that particular website or that particular movie or something else. So if we are doing everything manually, then that's called as manual testing. Then on the second thing is automation testing. So if certain part or most of the part we can automate through the different tools and technologies, then that is called as automation testing. Nowadays, in different formats of testing, we try to put some automation tools, or we try to implement any automation related tools which can reduce the manual work and which can increase the efficiency, increase the decrease the effort, and eventually save the money. So that is the basic aim of automation testing. Now manual testing basically is everything, as you know, tested manually. Only test management tools or bug tracking tools are needed. So in manual testing, so there are certain test management tools like TestRail, Azure Test Plans, Jira, Rally, or these kind of tools being used in manual testing just to track and manage the test cases all around. Now moving ahead on the second one, automation testing. As you know, testing is performed using specialized automation tools. So automation tools are responsible to automate the manual actions performed during the manual testing. So in automation testing, basically there are many automation tools which are very much popular. So for example, for functional testing, this Selenium is there, Cypress is there, Playwright is there, Rest Assured is to automate the API related scenarios, and APM is used to automate the mobile browser related scenarios. So all these tools are used to perform the automation testing. Okay, so now let's understand the phases of testing. Phases of testing, also known as software testing life cycle. Basically, whenever any particular software is tested, it has certain phases of testing. So that's why it is called software testing life cycle. So in the life of software testing, what are different phases in which software goes through, or we are going to learn here. So first thing is requirement analysis. Consider I have a requirement of any particular website which performs some bookings. Okay, so now what I will do as a customer, I will go to any software company or any software developer and I will say, okay, so I need this feature in a particular website. Okay, so what is developer's job? So they will try to understand, or what is the tester's job in that case. So they will try to understand my requirement as a customer. Okay, so what different things I want, what is the website which I want to build, what are different features I wanted to build in that. So basically in requirement analysis phase, software engineers try to understand the requirement of customer. Now comes second part. So second part is test planning. Now we have understood the requirement, we have created the software specification document and or SRS document and all those things. Now our task is to test that particular. Once it is built, then I want to test that particular software also, whether that is working well or not. So that's where second phase of testing comes, which is test planning. So what does test planning means? In test planning phase, basically we understand what are the ways in which we wanted to test, what are different resources we wanted, what are different tools or technologies we wanted to test, what would be the entry criteria of that testing phase, when we will get the build, what is the capacity of the team, what will be the number of testers who will be involved in testing. So all those planning of the test, planning of testing the software comes in this phase, in test planning phase. Now after test planning, once you have decided everything, what are the tools and technologies you are going to use, what are resources you are going to use, what are the ways you are going to use, so then comes test case development. In test case development, what do? We basically have certain test test cases on the basis of which we will perform the testing in a software. Okay, so for example, if I have a booking website where I did the planning, what are the different ways I had planned. Now, while writing the test cases, what will come? Whenever developers will give the software ready to us, to the testers, they will start performing the testing. But on what basis? So on the basis of test cases written by them. So that's what is called test case development. In this particular phase, we develop all the test cases to test the software. Now, fourth phase is, once test cases are completed, test case development is completed, it is test environment setup. Developers develop the application in development environment, and testers basically test in QA environments. So all those things, what would be the deployment process, what would be different environments which will be there, so in which testers will test their software. So all those things is done in test environment setup phase, where we set up the QA environments and the build process and deployment process and all those things is done in under test environment setup. Now, fifth part, once we have test case ready, once we have test planning is ready, test case is ready, test environment is ready, then we perform the test execution. Okay, so basically whatever number of test cases we have written for testing that particular feature, we perform test execution. So we do testing thoroughly of the application which is going to be released. So that's what we do in test execution. And if any particular test has failed, or it is not meeting the expected criteria, then we say that that particular test has failed, and eventually we log the bug in the system. So that means that application is not working well and it should be fixed. Now, last part is test closure. Test closure is an activity where we decide that what would be our entry criteria, what would be our exit criteria. So what are exit criteria and entry criteria? Once developers have developed the software, then we need to come into picture. When will we be starting the testing, or when will stop the testing? So we will say, okay, everything has been tested, everything is working fine, or whatever open bugs are there, those are not of high priority, and those kind of things is decided in testing closure activity. Okay, so these all are the 6 phases in which any particular software is tested, and this is called software testing life cycle. So first phase is requirement analysis, second phase is test planning, third phase is test case development, fourth phase is test environment setup, fifth phase is test execution, and sixth phase is test closure.
That was all in this video, and if you found this particular video useful, then I have one more video for you, which is Ultimate Career Path for Automation Test Engineers, where I have talked about how to become an awesome testing expert, and you will get that video in I button here. So go and watch that particular video and subscribe to the channel, like and comment whatever your feedbacks are. Thank you. See you in the next one. Jai Hind.